All right, today we're going to be talking about work or putting kids to work. So I'm not sure if I've told this story before, but a while back I was on a flight and it was either leaving Kansas or headed there. And I was sitting next to this older woman, I'd say in her mid 70s. We get to talking and she's telling me about how she lives on a farm, which was already unusual for me at that time, given I had spent most of my life in cities or suburbs, not rural Kansas. But anywho, at some point we start talking about family. And I ask her, how many kids she has. She says something like 7 or 8. Like 7 or 8 kids. Now, I don't know about you, but that is a lot for me. So naturally, given my own context, I'm like, how did you manage with so many children? She looked at me like this was nothing. Well, they helped out, of course. And she goes on to tell me about how all of her kids did their part around the house and the farm work. And this included taking care of the pigs. This is what she's telling me. And she's talking completely taking care of the pigs, like completely. And that's starting at age 5. And when she told me that, I was kind of in shock. And I asked her, well, what would happen if the kids didn't do their work? At this point, she looked at me like I was a bit crazy, kind of like I was asking a stupid question. And she says, well, the pigs would die. So do you get what this woman is saying? Her children were responsible for the pigs. So this was not a petting zoo, like, hey, little piggy. They cared for those pigs, took care of everything. So if her kids didn't do their work, the pigs would die. They would not continue living. That simple. So why am I sharing this story? One, because it's just kind of wild in itself, at least for me. And it's another great example of gaining as much exposure to different cultures as possible to learn from others. But most importantly, and relevant for what I'm talking about today, is kids aren't getting enough of this kind of real world experience in our society. Now, I don't mean they literally have to be taking care of pigs, but I'm talking about real work, the kind that we adults do, but that kids could do just as well, if not better, but that we rarely allow them to. And the thing is, this kind of activity, so getting better at something practical in life, is in large part how independence is developed and self-confidence too. Because human beings, and as young and old, we have to be able to do real work in the real world and do it well. And that feels good. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to take care of ourselves. Or for really young children, to just help us adults do real work. Now, again, I'm not saying it has to be a farm work or something. Only a very small percentage of us will ever have to care for livestock. It's just an example. There are a million other ways we can help children to do real work in all sorts of contexts today. And I'm talking from infancy until teenagers, which we'll get into later. I do want to make a warning up front here, though, before we hop in. And that's that I might rile some people up today. I'm not sure, but maybe. It's just that in our culture, there is a strong aversion to this pro-work mindset. That's specifically in traditional schools and in traditional homes where children, they're kept as far away as possible from real-world activities. And I'm talking anything from overloading students with worksheets and meaningless busy work homework to putting 5-year-olds at home in front of fake kitchens and fake toolboxes and fake this and fake that. I think we need to stop and rethink all this phony and useless stuff we're pushing on kids. Anyhow, today we'll be talking about putting kids to work instead. I hope you enjoy. The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. I'm going to start here by reading part of an email I recently received from a listener. Here she goes. You raised an issue that I was planning to write to you about already. The issue of, are we actually losing learning during the pandemic because kids aren't doing school in traditional ways? I heard a story about a school in Texas that was one of the earliest to open during the pandemic. And one thing that was emphasized a lot is how students are failing behind because of the challenges of doing school virtually, etc., etc. They interviewed a 17-year-old senior who had started working at a smoothie shop last summer because her dad had lost his job due to COVID. And they talked about how she was joining her online classes from the smoothie shop. The perspective seemed to be, what a tragedy that this kid is missing out on learning because she has to work, which just struck me as so bizarre. Of course, it is a tragedy that her dad lost his job and her family is struggling financially. But is it a tragedy that she is learning and growing by working at a real job instead of being in school? Is it somehow better for the kid who just rolls out of bed and joins his Zoom classes while also scrolling through his Instagram feed? Or better for the kid who is stuck behind a desk for hours on end, quote, learning in person? I guess if you hold traditional education in high esteem, which it seems people mostly do by default, then the answer would be yes. But taking one step back from that perspective leaves me wondering why all high school students didn't go find jobs and other productive activities to do this year instead of going to their extremely non-ideal in-person or virtual school. Of course, being as Montessori aware as I am, I already think high schoolers would be better off working than learning in a traditional school. But this pandemic situation has me wondering why everyone isn't thinking that right now. All right, so that was her email. And I think that's a great question. Why isn't everyone thinking this right now? Well, there are a bunch of reasons, but for one, which this listener herself alluded to, it might not have even crossed some parents' minds to put their kids to work. I mean, culturally, for most people, at least in the States, work and children don't normally go together. And think about this. It is actually illegal to have your child working instead of going to school. And this is not an exaggeration. Like you could go to jail. In America, and I imagine similarly in most supposedly civilized societies, 14 is the earliest age one can even start working, and definitely not full time. Now, it's funny to say this, but I feel lucky that my mom broke this law when I was growing up by helping me find work, and well before I was 14. And before even that official work, I was working for my grandpa at 8 or 9 years old, doing a bunch of office work at his house, where he had a kind of, I think, an in-home office space, and it was way before that was cool. So, I'd do stapling, stuffing envelopes, organizing files, just helping with errands. And man, I loved it. It gave me confidence and pride in myself. Not to mention I was making actual money, not fake allowance. It felt good to do real world things and this adult work. But again, before age 14, to do this for real, like to get an official paycheck, that's literally illegal. Again, at least in America. So even if parents wanted their kid to work during COVID or sometime in the future, they would not be allowed to. And after the legal age, so say for a high schooler, the number of hours one can work are limited by law. So our society is structured in a way crazy enough, to discourage children working. Incidentally, before I go any further, I can just see somebody out there being like, but Jesse, child labor, it's horrible. Let me just note that we're not talking about 6-year-olds doing forced manual labor at some dingy factory. Hopefully it's clear that's not the kind of work I'm talking about. But anyway, in addition to paid work being generally illegal for kids, another issue is that many parents today don't even see a value in their children working. For instance, for some moms and dads, and I know this is across the globe, their children not working is seen as a good thing on their end. They see it as a positive if you can give everything to your children so that they don't have to work. That's what's considered making it. That's viewed as success. I'll give you a kind of ridiculous example of this. So a couple years back, a celebrity was in the news because it seems his preschool daughter got kicked out of some private Los Angeles Montessori school. I'm not sure what went down exactly, but this rich and famous man, who I'm not going to name, if you know him, you know him, he got on the air of some show and started talking trash on Montessori. In reality, it was on his daughter doing actual work. I'm going to play the clip, which starts out with him complaining actually about a parent night at his daughter's former school. And his daughter's name is Monroe, by the way.
So there was the last 15 minutes of the event was a video, which I thought, oh, great, we're going to be able to see what the kids have been doing and learning. It was no shit. It was 15 minutes of the kids doing dishes. And I just thought to myself,
why were they doing dishes?
I don't know. It's like part of you clear your plate.
Like playing house? Kind
clear
of
your plate and you do your dishes and you put stuff away. So
they didn't show Nanny doing dishes?
Which was weird to me. That was odd. Like the kids were doing the dishes on their own.
What?
Oh, my God.
Right.
What does this world come to?
What is it, we in China?
Jesus.
So I thought on one hand, Monroe is never going to do dishes.
Yeah.
But number two, look, if she did do dishes, I could just teach her that at home for free.
Well, you need to learn too,
Right.
quite frankly.
I would have to learn first, and then I would teach her. So
Can you imagine this? Now, for those who don't know, in good Montessori schools, children actually clean up after themselves. Like there's no maid to do it for them or no lunch lady who tidies things up. Like the children do it, and from a very young age. Like many parents, though, don't see this early work, like this early development of actual independence, as a positive. And another thing, this is a broader point about our culture. Most people today don't even see real work as part of education. School is for getting information and taking tests to see how much you've retained. And success is judged by grades. I know that's generalized for sure, but basically that's what education today breaks down to. So having children do work, like washing the dishes they use and taking care of their surroundings in the classroom, that is abnormal. That would be a paradigm shift for most parents, as that's not what school is about to them. But this is a serious problem because learning to take care of oneself is vital. I'll give you a contrast to make this real. So let's take what the norm is today in traditional schools and homes. Say a student who is traditionally successful, so she's getting all A's in elementary and junior high school, but imagine that this child just happens to also be incapable of even making her own lunch. I mean, I've literally had this situation before when I was a relatively traditional school teacher myself. Like I was a part of this, But how do you think such a star student really feels about herself if her mom is packing her lunch at 13 years old? Or take another example, say a 10 or 11-year-old, or even into late teens, who doesn't know how to wash his own clothes at home in the washing machine. This is pathetic. I mean, imagine someone else washing your underwear and you're looking on baffled. And I'm not being mean here. I'm just being real. I know 4-year-olds who help their parents do the laundry and the dishes. Kids are capable of this, clearly. So what I'm getting at here is, to the extent that children are capable, they should be taking part in the activities of life, whether in school or at home. And, I'm not some bitter old man saying, children these days need to do their chores. No, this work I'm talking about is an exciting part of becoming a grown human being. We take care of ourselves and our surroundings, and we take care of one another. Just because children are smaller than us doesn't mean they can't do big people things. Now, some may say, well, it's so easy, though, to just later learn how to make a lunch, or wash socks, or blend a smoothie at Jamba Juice. But that's missing the point. What would be lost is all that time the child is unnecessarily dependent on an adult to do things he could totally do on his own. And that means a feeling of dependence, which ultimately is a feeling of insecurity, a feeling that I need others to take care of me. And that is a problem. For one, as said by the late Haim Gnat, dependency breeds hostility. And overall, we want to get children away from dependence and instead toward independence. The essence of which, as Maria Montessori put it, is, quote, being able to do something for oneself, end of quote. Now, with really young children, before age 5 or 6, I want to note that the work is not about the outcome, but instead about process and about being able to do things like us grown-ups, which I'll talk more about in a second. But whatever the work looks like in practice at any particular age, that work, so cleaning, making food in a real kitchen, taking care of pets or plants, fixing things with real tools, all of it is so important. A hero of mine, says Frederick Douglass, talked about this over a century ago in a speech of his called Self-Made Men. And side note, when he says men, he's talking everyone. So it's men, women, children, black, white, whatever you are. Okay, so here's Douglass. Quote, "We may explain success mainly by one word, and that word is work. Work, work, work. Not transient and fitful effort, but patient, enduring, honest, unremitting, and indefatigable work, into which the whole heart is put, and which, in both temporal and spiritual affairs, is the true miracle worker." So this man clearly values work, right? Anyways, continuing, quote, "Everyone may avail himself of this marvelous power, if he will. There is no royal road to perfection. Certainly no one must wait for some kind of friend to put a springing board under his feet, upon which he may easily bound from the first round of their ladder onward and upward to its highest round. If he waits for this, he may wait long, and perhaps forever." End of quote. But that's exactly what we're doing with children these days. We're waiting. We think real work comes later, after school. But we can't skip real work and instead just cram a bunch of textbook information in children's heads and then 18 years later expect them to be ready for the real world. No, that's not how it works. They won't be ready. They aren't ready. And we all know this. We all see it. School is broken, as everyone says. But the thing is, parents just keep sending them there anyway. I'll give you a tragic example of this. So take the saying that school helps keep poor kids off the streets. Now, that might be true, and that's a good thing. But are these poor kids getting anything better in return? I mean, I want poor youth off the streets, so not in gangs or on drugs or worse, but all that is merely guarding against negatives. Basically, just keeping a child physically safe. But the absolute bare minimum for a school is safety. I mean, these kids could stay at a neighbor's house all day watching TV and they'd get that. Being safe is clearly not enough. We expect more from school. But what do these poor kids get? After a dozen plus years of, quote, learning, all most can do is blindly mimic what their teachers have taught them. That's not a good trade-off. I would much rather have these kids, and my own future kids, working on a farm with that mother I met and maybe reading some good books at night than they're going to most public schools across the country. And I should say, this isn't just about public schools or poor kids. The affluent at private schools, or even at supposedly great public ones, are often in just as crappy a situation. Like, many wealthier parents think they're getting something better for their kids, while in fact, they're merely getting the same schooling just in pretty wrapping paper. You know, they got more modern school buildings, teachers with fancier titles, their kids swiping away on shinier tech gadgets. But is anything fundamentally different under that showy surface? No. It's still just stale, old, conventional school. No real world work. Instead, it's just dropping useless information into kids' heads, day in, day out. And meanwhile, on a side note, all our pop culture and politicians can do is argue about what kind of information to drop. I mean, it's sad to watch on all sides and from all angles, because ultimately it's just empty. It's not about truly aiding children to become unique, independent human beings. It's not about helping them learn how to think, but only what to think. We need to wake up as a society And again, this goes for the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. Children's future, our future, depends on seeing today's education for what it is. And that's mainly a waste of time, a waste of life, really. And for most of us who went through traditional schooling in some form, we know this already from our own experience. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. I mean, imagine if we skipped even just 2 years of high school and instead spent that time as an apprentice at some job we dreamed of as a kid. Which would have aided our lives more? The schooling we just sat through for 2 years, or an apprenticeship? And without real work, like without children developing actual skills and feeling the pride of personal independence, we're going to get kids rebelling. And for good reason. They want more from this world. They want to be strong, unique people, individuals who can think and act on their own. Here's Maria Montessori on this point, and this is from her book, The Absorbent Mind. Quote, "The child seeks for independence by means of work, an independence of body and mind. Little he cares about the knowledge of others. He wants to acquire a knowledge of his own, to have experience of the world, and to perceive it by his own unaided efforts." End of quote. We have to be asking ourselves, and this is both in school and at home, how often are we allowing children to do anything remotely close to adult work? How often are we allowing them to take part in the real world? I feel like I'm getting a little too theoretical here, maybe some preachy. So I'm going to give a bunch of examples of actual work or real world activities that kids can do. Now, for older children, it's super easy. Have them get a job the first day it's legal. And to be straight with you, I'd have them do this well before it's legal. I dare someone to try and arrest me for my kid working, for her actually gaining experience taking care of herself. Anyway, find someone who will pay your child under the table for something. Mowing the lawn, washing a car, walking the dog. You get the point. And let me note real quick that I'm talking about encouraging this with children, not turning it into some battle with them. You have to struggle, son. The real world, it won't be so kind to you. Like, no. That will never go over well. And it has a negative feel to it too, which just isn't necessary. I like how my mom eventually handled things when I was an older kid. Like, she told me she's going to continue buying all the basics, but if I wanted anything after that, I'd have to figure out how to pay for it myself. Like, you want some new Jordans? How are you paying for them? Now here, age-wise, we're talking about maybe late elementary and up. Of course, we're not having preschoolers pay for their Crocs or something. But on that note, let me get to them. So let's get to the very young. I'm going to list off a bunch of work you can have your young child do, and not for pay or to get an allowance, just to do the work. I mean, here, children should love to help you with this stuff if it's modeled right. So think washing tables and chairs, sweeping floors, squeegeeing windows, setting the table for meals. There's actually this amazing video of a toddler named Hazel doing this for her whole homeschool class. Search on YouTube, "What is Montessori?" and you should be able to find my video with that clip in it. You can help your child help you garden. Or if you don't know how to garden, just learn to garden with your son or daughter. I mean, that's fun work together right there. Make meals with your kid. Or if super young, just have them do the simplest part of the meal, like washing the carrots under water or something. Make coffee with your child. There's another awesome video, incidentally, out there of a toddler and its dad doing that. Fold the laundry. Make the bed. If you're into working on cars, get your kid involved. I mean, even if it's just having your 2-year-old daughter hand you a wrench. Simple. You get the point here. The possibilities are endless. Just come up with stuff that's relevant to your life. And even infants can get involved. I mean, it might sound strange, but you might not think of they're observing you as like working, but it is. I mean, that's often the first step in real work, watching how others do it. I mean, why put your infant on his back in front of some silly, flashy toy when he could be watching you gardening outside, or you making dinner, or feeding the dog, or paying your bills, whatever? Just have him watch. And children love it, as I don't have to tell parents out there, And again, they gain tremendously from it. So why not let them watch real things, real work? So let them watch you actually baking cookies instead of staring at the freaking Cookie Monster on TV. And quickly, but really important note overall for our youngest kids, so birth to say 5, we have to keep in mind that for them, the end goal is not the point. So, cleaning a table perfectly is not their interest. Pouring water from a jug into a cup without spilling any of it, like that might be your goal, but it's not necessarily theirs. So the purpose for very young children is in the doing itself. It's kind of like they are practicing being adults. So they're more focused on process, not product. But whatever is a child's work, whether it's an infant observing something you're doing, or a preschooler helping you, spread jelly on toast, or your teenager coding a website for you, real work can bring out the best in children and the best in all of us. I have this, it's some meaningful words related to this, and I think they're fitting for any age really. So it's, quote, "Nothing so bolsters our self-confidence and reconciles us with ourselves as the continuous ability to create, to see things grow and develop under our hand, day in, day out." End of quote. So that's the late Eric Hoffer in his work, The True Believer. Interestingly, in addition to being an author, for years Hoffer was also a longshoreman. So he literally loaded and unloaded ships every day. And this actually leads me to one potential objection to all this talk about work. What about academics? What about, quote, learning? Well, first, all this work is learning. It's learning how to do real things in the real world, which brings with it, as I've talked about already, independence and a genuine confidence in oneself. But I understand the criticism. Doing work of the kind I've been talking about is not enough. Like, children also need intellectual education. They need knowledge beyond their immediate circumstances. If all we're doing is raising pigs, that's all we'll know. And that's a very limited life. Like, learning academic content, so gaining exciting insight into the enormous world out there, that goes hand in hand with this more practical seeming work. Now, there is a way to ensure that subject area learning, so math, language, science, history, that it integrates with real work. That's not my purpose today to get into what that looks like in an effective classroom, but it exists. I've seen it, I've been a part of it for years, and I've got a number of different podcast episodes on how it's done. And you can check all of those out if you like. So I'm saying academics do matter a lot. But the related point I want to emphasize here is that traditional school academics, where a teacher tells you something, you remember it for a test to get a good grade, and then you forget it, that is not learning. That is what a parakeet does for a cracker. Like, genuine academics is hugely important in life, but it too has to be connected to real life. And when it is, man, boy, do kids love to learn. About numbers, how to read, about battles and people and places throughout history, about science. But again, getting into this is beyond what I'm covering today. We'd be here for hours. So just a note to say that I am not advocating children do more physical work at the expense of intellectual learning. They need both. Okay, so one more quick objection to work, which I found it usually comes from affluent parents, but it can be from any mom or dad really. And that has to do with play. But what about children just being able to play? Childhood should be a time of innocent joy and smiles and playing. So first of all, who said so? And second, why is work not considered innocent? Why don't we adults think of joy and smiles and play with work? Like, some of my best memories in life are working as a kid and now as an adult. Work can be amazing at any age. Like, the doing itself can be a blast, even if exhausting sometimes, and the pride that comes afterward, it's huge. And not to mention the fun and silliness when you have some cool peers or colleagues beside you. Like, work is great, or at least it can be. And I'll go even further. I'll have Maria Montessori say it. Quote, "Children would rather work than play." End of quote. Now, I don't think she's exaggerating. Like, I've seen this time and again, and that's over the past 15 plus years of experience with thousands of children. Like, I've seen boys and girls choose work over play. And as a kid myself, I would sometimes do the same. Now, having said this, and so I don't sound like some detached nutball, let me state adamantly, children do love to play. Of course. They could play for hours on end, just a blast. And it's not merely children. Like, we adults love to play. But for all of us, without work, play would turn into a nightmare. And that's because play, think freely running around, chatting with friends, taking a chill bike ride, skipping around in puddles, this is all a wonderful break. But it's not what brings that deep joy in life, like success and work brings. I mean, think of the proud, smiling child who comes up to you and says, "I did it," when she completes a challenging work activity in school. Or think of ourselves when we just kick ass on some project we've been working on for weeks at work. Like, that's also joyful. That's smiles. That's innocence. But it's actually more profound than the kind we experience with play. Anyway, all to say that both work and play are a great part of life, but work is ultimately even more meaningful. And wild enough, the more we have that perspective, the more work and play tend to feel like they're merging into one. Which leads me to probably the most important point. And that's that ultimately we ourselves must love our work. If work is miserable for us as adults, then it will in all likelihood be miserable for children too. And that's because they model after us. I know I had mixed messages as a kid from my own dad. And on the one hand, you could tell he got such immense pride and joy from doing what he did well. I mean, he was a professional handyman, could fix anything he got his hands on. It was amazing. But at times, he also had a mindset that work is drudgery, and you do it to reach the weekend. Like, I have this vivid memory of him singing this one song. I don't want to work. I just want to bang on me drum all day. Hey, hey. Something like that. Do you know that one? Actually, let me look for it real quick. Hold on. Now, that's kind of fun, actually. But imagine your dad, the person you idolized the most as a kid, explicitly telling you at times that work sucks and sounding like he means it pretty deeply. Like, how would that affect you? And luckily for me, it was rare he'd do this and his words didn't match up with his actions regardless. Again, the man was a master at fixing stuff and his love for that was evident. And of course, all of us sometimes get tired of working and we just need a freaking break, you know? But if you or I truly don't like what we're doing work-wise, yet we just miserably stick to it year after year and maybe talk trash, then what message does that send to the children in our lives? Like, not a positive one. So I say, let's give them something positive. Let's go after what we love. Even if it's something small. I once heard this perspective shared perfectly by Mr. Rogers, interestingly enough. So here's a clip I have of him.
So a great gift of any adult to a child, it seems to me, is to love what you do in front of the child. I mean, if you love to bicycle, if you love to repair things, do that in front of the children. Let them catch the attitude that that's fun. Because you know attitudes are caught, they're not taught.
So Fred Rogers wasn't putting on his sweater and shoes every day for Mr. Rogers' neighborhood because he had to, but because he loved to. Work is joy. Work is life. Well, now I definitely feel like I'm becoming a preacher here, so I'm going to stop. My main point is just this. Put your kids to work. They will thank you for it. I will thank you for it. And we will all benefit as a result. Okay, that's it. Quick note before I get out of here. If you appreciate what I've said today, please leave a comment or a review wherever you're listening. Or at the least, like it or thumb it up or share it, whatever you do on social media. It helps spread the word about this show to others. And if you want to tell me anything, suggest a topic, share your warm wishes, your hate, you can always find me at montessorieducation.com. All right. Peace out, everyone, and adios for now. I'm not sure why I felt like saying peace out, but I did. Take care, everyone.